Hello everyone and welcome to my little corner of the internet. My name's Michael and I'm bitten by a radioactive book. Today I want to bring you my April wrap-up. I've been in a bit of a slump since February, but mid-April I started to read more again. So for the whole month I have only finished 5 books. That is, in a reading month I'm able to read way more, like more 10ish, 12 books. But I think for only 1.5 weeks I've been really reading. Finishing up 5 books is quite an accomplishment. So let's get into the books I finished. First of all, we have Crystal Rayne, the first installment in Tobias Asbuckle's Xenovell saga. This is a science fiction slash steampunk, dieselpunk kind of novel. It's very interesting because we are on a planet that is settled by humans, but most of the technology and the knowledge of what happened before has been lost, and regaining it is part of the plot, so I won't go into too much detail on what happened there. Let's just say we are at a technological level where the people have guns and there are steam engines like trains and boats, but on the other hand there's no electricity or higher electronics. The very interesting thing about the book is that the two predominant cultures on the planet are inspired on the one hand by Caribbean colonists and on the other hand by the Aztecian culture. And that makes a really weird mix-up. For example, and this is something that is on the one hand very cool, but on the other hand a bit difficult, that most of the Caribbean protagonists, and these are almost all of our main protagonists, speak in a very kind of raga accent all the time. So it is really something that you have to get used to, but on the other hand, it's a really unique mark of this book. Overall, we are getting into the conflict between these two cultures when the Aztecians attack the Caribbeans, and we follow mostly perspective from the Caribbeans. There is John. John is a mysterious character because he is not like a person of color, which is very unusual there, and he doesn't seem to age. That is very unusual as well. And of course, he has lost his memory. And he has a wife, Shanta, and a son, Jerome. And Jerome is also a POV character. We also follow Oashkatul, who is an Aztecian, but who works as a spy for the Moon Goose Man, which are like the military of the Caribbeans. There's also Pepper, who is another mysterious character, and one or two other perspectives that are not as important. Overall, it was a very interesting read, very interesting world building, but the story or the plot in itself was rather conservative. You could spot early on where it is going, and therefore it wasn't totally exciting, but nonetheless it was a good read, and in the end I rated it 3 stars. Next off we have Heir of Nooran. This is the third and last installment in Michael J. Sullivan's Rhaeria Revelation series. We're still following Hadrian and Royce. It doesn't make a lot of sense to give anything away from the plot, because the series in itself starts off with one or two books that have a procedural kind of character, but also lay the groundwork for an overall story arc, and the overall story arc gets more dominant with each of the like 6 books. I say 6 because it's like 6 books that are put together in 3 bind-up volumes, and so with Heir of Nooran we're getting like the last 2 books, Wintertide and Perseplicus. And overall it was a very satisfying ending from my point of view for the whole series, and we had a lot of loose ends tied up very neatly, so it was a good ending to an enjoyable series. And as all of the other books, I've rated it 4 stars, although you can see a progress in quality. So the first book was maybe more 2 stories that were like 3.5, which I then brought up to a 4, and the next ones were more between 3.5 and 4, and these are solid 4, and the last one maybe 4.5 or a 5. So yeah, overall, a very enjoyable series, highly recommended if you're into like a more classical sword and sorcery / epic fantasy. It's a kind of interesting mix up because it combines elements of both. Next up we have Range of Ghosts, which is the first installment in Elizabeth Bear's Eternal Sky series. This is another book that is heavily dominated by a very interesting world building, because we have different cultures that you would find on the Silk Road in our world. In Elizabeth Bear's world there is the Celadon Highway, and there are various cultures, starting with cultures that we would put in the Middle East, and other cultures that we would put more in the Far East, Asia, China, Mongolia, and the center of the attention is on Temur. Temur is a Quersnik, which is some kind of rider people that, yeah, reminds me of the Mongolians. And we meet him when he walks away from a battlefield, a battle that he lost, and he is the son of one of 2 competing brothers, I think, that fight for the Khaganate. So his grandfather used to be the Khagan, which is the Khan of Khans, so the leader of the Quersnik Empire, and now there's basically a succession war going on, and he ends up on the losing side. And the second character we're following is Samarkar. Samarkar is a woman who was a princess, and to get herself out of the line of succession and keep her and her family safe and in peace, she decided to step away from the line of succession and become a wizard, because then you give up all your rights to or claims to thrones. So she is not of the Quersnik people. She belongs to the Razan people, which are more about a Middle Eastern kind of faction. So they have like wizards, and they can conjure jinns, for example, and interesting stuff like that. And yeah, she decides to become a wizard, and we meet her when she goes through the trials of becoming a wizard. And these 2 storylines then, about the middle of the book, they get connected. And it's very interesting to see where it goes from there. I don't want to go into too much detail about the plot, because this is one of the coolest things about the book. Having said that, the book, although it is very short for an epic fantasy, only about 350 pages, it takes a while. It takes its time to establish the characters, and for my personal liking, it started a bit too slow. Because we spend a lot of time with Timur where nothing really important happens, where he heals from being in that battle, and it takes up half the book really to get anything going. But from there on, it's a very great and interesting read. So in the end, I rated it 4 stars, because I personally was very into the whole different world building scenario. But you might deduct another star if you are more of a character focused reader, because the characters stay a bit distanced. That might be something that is Elizabeth Bear's style. I've read another book by her where it was a bit of the same. For me, that doesn't matter too much, but if you're really into character driven stories, that might be even more of a 3 or 3.5 star book, because a lot of time is spent to establish the world building, which is the most interesting thing and theme about the book. The 4th book I finished was Timon's Flight, which is the first installment in Mary Victoria's Chronicles of the Tree Saga. And of course it is a book that comes with another interesting world building, because here the people believe actually that the world is just a giant tree. And in fact it is. So we have this large, huge tree, and all the people live among the branches. The branches are so big that there are like whole towns on the branches, and the people fly between towns and in various heights in airships. So that is very interesting. And I thought actually it would be like a light-hearted action adventure, but there's a huge emphasis on religion, religious discrimination, racial discrimination, because we have two very distinct parts of the tree. There's a tree a part that is very like wealthy, and where the tree is healthy, and the people there see it as like a sign from the tree or their religion that they are on the right path. And there's another empire in another part of the tree where the leaves have gone, and the tree is more of a skeletal kind of being, and they are enslaved or colonized by the other faction, and manipulated into sacrificing themselves even for religious purposes. So there's a huge emphasis on those kind of inequalities and revolution going on. It had a darker tone than I actually imagined, because our main character, Timon, is like the typical orphan boy who is raised in a monastery and is supposed to join their ranks, but wants to discover the world, fly around in a spaceship built by his friend the builder Galliano, who has a lot of parallels actually to Galileo Galilei. So that is really interesting, but the focus, as I said, is very heavy on this religious discrimination, racial discrimination and stuff like that. So overall, that it was a good and enjoyable read, but not really something that gripped me and was really captivating. So I think overall I rated it 3 stars, so it's still good and enjoyable, and it's a series I will progress in the future, but at the moment there are so many other series that have me more excited after the first installment, so that might take a while to actually finish up the Chronicles of the Tree Saga. And last but not least, I've read a Terry Pratchett book, because one of my goals for this year was to try to read one Discworld book each month, and I'm at the 5th book at the moment, which was Sorcery, and Sorcery was a very interesting book. It was about Rincewind, so it belongs to the Rincewind books, where he is one of the main POVs. And what happened is if you know Discworld, the wizards there are actually not very good at doing wizard stuff, and magic is not that powerful. Yeah, the wizards are normally more of a laughing stock in the Discworld, but there comes an eighth son of an eighth son of an eighth son. I'm not totally sure if it this, yeah, something like this, and he is a sorcerer. He can tap into the source of magic, and he is very powerful and tries to change up all the things and bring the wizards into a position where they are the dominant force on the Discworld. And of course we have a lot of interesting characters, funny characters, some like Rincewind or the Librarian or the Luggage that we already know. Other characters are new, like Konina, for example, who is the daughter of Cohen the Barbarian. She is a very interesting character. We also get Nigel the Destroyer, who is a barbarian in training, actually. And he's a very funny character as well. Overall, I thought this was a solid entry in the Discworld series, not the best. And I think the plot, although it was very epic in those kind of humorous books, yeah, the epicness of the plot does not play such a major role. And for me, the really interesting elements are always the kind of funny observations about the world, about the culture, and although there are a lot of like funny things that make you smile, the actual really clever and wow kind of jokes or observations in this one were very occasional from my point of view. It could have been more. And so overall, as I said, a solid entry into this series, so I rated it 3 stars, but I think there are better books in the Discworld series to read. So, this was my wrap up for the month of April. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please hit the like button. If you want to see more of me, subscribe to my channel. Tomorrow we will have my May TBR going up. This is already turning out to be insanely large again, and I don't know if I get to all of it, but we will see tomorrow, and till then I hope you get bitten by a really good book too. Bye!